I was about to say, here's a curious story, but it's not that curious. It's quite predictable in the rather bizarre upside-down world we've ended up in. Doctors who change gender, spoiler alert, you can't actually do that, but I know what they're saying. Doctors who change gender are reportedly being given new registration numbers as a doctor, not for their car, erasing their disciplinary history from the public register. So if they've been given a written warning for something, or they had a row with a colleague and it wasn't very good and they got reported, if you change gender, that would be eradicated. This means future patients cannot access information linked to their previous identity. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has condemned the practice and demanded immediate changes. Let's speak with Helen Joyce, Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, author of Transgender Identity and the New Battle for Women's Rights. Always nice to have you on, Helen. I think every time we chat, I start with the same line. When I first read this story, I had to read it again because I thought, what, really? You can eradicate your history because you decided to go from being Mike to Michelle?
I know, welcome to my world. Every day I think I've seen the last bit of insanity, and every day there's a new bit of insanity. Sure. It appears there is no bottom to the insanity. Yes, this story is correct, that you don't need any paperwork. You literally, if you are a doctor, you just need to say to the GMC, I have changed my gender, and they will give you a new number. Now, people do change their names all the time, especially when they get married, but your number, your doctor's registration number, is meant to come with you. Yes. And if something has happened and you have been suspended for 3 months or more, but you're now back practicing, that'll be visible on your public facing register for, I think it's 15 years. But not if you've done this process of telling them that you've changed gender. They will just sort of abandon one record and create a new one. So rather rapidly, you can see this isn't actually about trans particularly. It's really about a loophole. And we know what sort of person uses loopholes. Bad people.
Well, right. I mean, I can't understand why they would even suggest you get a new number. Is there any reason for that? I mean, like you say, if you get married, you don't get a new number. You just keep you change your name. You might change your address, but you don't change your registration number.
Well, because they want to change the M and F, don't they? So they want to pretend there never was a male doctor called Mike, that this doctor always was female Michelle. So Mike has to kind of die. It's the same sort of rationale that gets us calling it dead naming, to call a trans person by their previous name. I mean, it just shows you what happens when you start with a falsehood. I mean, it's not possible, as you said in the introduction, to change your sex. But if you pretend that you can, you find yourself willy-nilly brought along a path to doing things that are absolutely absurd and that you would never have done if that's where you had started out. If somebody had said to the GMC, are you willing to do this? They would have said no, but now they're doing it.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Because if you have been, I mean, this idea, this suggestion, this ruling is completely consistent with somebody who believes you can do that. And because of that, once they've bought into the lie, then naturally what follows are things like this. That, as far as they're concerned, they're doing what's logical.
Exactly. And, patients do have the right to say that they are only willing to be examined by somebody of the same sex as them, both men and women, but it's more important for women for obvious reasons. Yeah. Now, the GMC says that that's something that can be managed at the individual practice level, but that's not correct. That's where it's hurtful and offensive and difficult. Like, it's not for a woman to walk into the examining room and look at the doctor that she thought was a woman from the name and the F on the registration and say, excuse me, are you a man? And she knows she's going to get called transphobic. It might be hugely embarrassing for her. It's for the GMC to show leadership on this and to just simply say, it's not possible to change sex. You do you in your personal life, that's fine. But when it comes to the consulting room, it's the patient's needs and interests that come first.
Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has condemned this practice. He's demanded immediate changes. I don't know whether that just falls on deaf ears, because I can only imagine that the various medical councils involved in this would just simply say, well, I'm sorry, we don't have to listen to the Health Secretary on this. It's not a job for the Health Secretary, although I'd like to think it is.
I mean, I think they actually do have operational independence, but I think it's pretty brave to just ignore the Health Secretary when he points out something that 90% plus of people in the country must agree on this.
Yeah. Where do we go with all of these stories, Helen, on the kind of wider issue? There is maybe a misplaced sense, and maybe this is because of what's happening in other countries around the world, that the tide is turning, common sense is returning to to the public conversation and all this absolute nonsense of, you know, a big bloke with a penis and a beard who just decides one day I'm a woman. You know, all get in the bin, mate. You're not. You never. You know you're not as well. That's the worst part about it. I don't dispute some people who genuinely psychologically have an issue where they believe that is their correct gender. I don't dispute that. I don't have to recognise things that aren't facts, of course. But so we can all wear more than one hat. But are things changing? Is my point, Helen.
Yeah, but the trouble is that this has been going on, especially behind the scenes and in institutions for so long, at least 20 years, that it's become really embedded. I mean, we've just seen an employment tribunal with a nurse, Sandy Peggy, in Fife in Scotland, and I watched a lot of it remotely. And the doctor in question, who is a man who says he's a woman, he was going into the women's changing rooms and changing in there, and Sandy objected to that. Now, she was the one who was suspended. Yeah. But that doctor insisted under oath that he was female, not just that he was a woman or a trans woman, that he was female, that he was biologically female. So this has been, this has been allowed. That's an A&E doctor saying this. You'd think he'd know better. But if it's been allowed for so long, a lot of people have built their identities on it. They think they're entitled. They've built their workplace practices, and it is going to be the devil of a job to try to get it back to sanity.
Yeah, indeed. Sadly, we will speak again, Helen. I mean that kindly, of course. Helen Joyce with us on the programme. Helen is Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters